Last week, a 24-year-old American walked out of a California prison after 7.5 months behind bars. He was in jail for refusing to give prosecutors a video that he shot and for refusing to testify in a court case. Josh Wolfe is a blogger, an activist, and he calls himself a journalist. Now, job titles usually don't count for much, but in this instance, they did, because at the heart of the legal case against Josh Wolfe was the question: are bloggers journalists, and are these new media amateurs entitled to the same legal protections that professional reporters get? Josh Wolfe is a political activist. His website carries a headline: "The revolution will be televised." And there's a video posted there that tells his story.
July 8th of last year, I was filming a protest in the Mission District of San Francisco. A police officer was injured in some sort of altercation with protesters that were there.
2 days later, Wolfe says, he got a knock on his door.
My first thought is it's a reporter from Miami asking about the protest. Not a big deal. So I'm like, yeah, sure. All of a sudden he flashes the badge, FBI, just like in the movies or something.
Wolfe said the police wanted him to hand over this videotape of the demonstration as potential evidence. He refused, saying he was a journalist and that American laws shielded him from having to surrender the tape. Then Wolfe was subpoenaed, ordered to testify before a grand jury. Again, he refused. Again, the blogger cited laws that are in place for a reason.
You can't have trust when the contact thinks that if he tells you something, you're going to be forced to either choose between telling them what he said to you or who he was and going to jail.
But the courts ruled against him, saying that because Wolfe was not employed by any publication or news agency, he was not a journalist. He was on his way to prison, a trip his fellow bloggers documented on film. In all, Josh Wolfe spent 7.5 months there, longer than any journalist has ever served in the U.S. for refusing to testify. The Wolfe story has been reported by other media. When Yahoo did it, it spoke to journalists who could not agree on whether Wolfe was a political activist, a journalist, or both.
I think you can be a blogger and be a journalist. There are people who fit that, who are. But when you're an activist cavorting with the people you're chronicling, then you're not a journalist.
The fact that Josh Wolfe has strong political views does not disqualify him from being a journalist, any more than the fact that I'm an editorial page editor and have opinions disqualifies me from being a journalist. The fact is, he was out at that rally collecting information to disseminate to the public. I think that makes him a journalist.
ABC 7 I-Team has learned jailed Bay Area journalist Josh Wolfe may be released as early as this afternoon.
Wolfe's eventual release was treated as news by mainstream media in San Francisco. They detailed the deal he made with prosecutors. He would not have to testify, but did surrender his videotape, which Wolfe says did not reveal anyone's identity. Then he posted what he said was the same tape on his website, so that everyone could examine what the police were seeing. Josh Wolfe says he did the jail time on a point of principle. With citizen media on the rise and the blogosphere growing, the issue of who is and who is not a journalist will grow in importance along with it. Among our news bites this week, a couple of attempts to rein in the blogosphere, or at least to get bloggers to behave. Malaysian authorities are talking about forcing bloggers to register with the government. Bloggers there have been accused of spreading lies about the government, and two of the better-known ones are being sued for defamation by the New Straits Times, a government-endorsed newspaper. One of Malaysia's ministers said that another option under consideration is to make all internet surfers identify themselves as well, which would allow the government to track their travels on the net. An attempt to make the blogosphere a more civil place through a code of conduct has met with a predictably uncivil response from bloggers. The idea came from Jimmy Wells, founder of the communal encyclopedia Wikipedia, who thinks a 7-point program could eliminate much of the abusive material out there while still preserving the free spirit of the medium. We can't repeat many of the responses his idea provoked because of profanity. Some of the 71 million bloggers out there see a code of conduct as a slippery slope that would slide all the way to censorship or government control. Thailand is the latest country to take on YouTube over the issue of what is acceptable political comment. The Thai government blocked access to the file-sharing site after someone posted an unflattering film about the country's king. Thailand has a law banning material that mocks its monarch, who some Thais believe is divine. YouTube has since offered to work with Thai officials to help them block specific videos without denying Thais access to the entire site. Controlling the flow of information is a form of power, so it follows that controlling what people see on the internet, the most potent communications tool known to man, is a rather big deal. And it's not just the domain of the corporate big boys like Google. There's a lot to understand about who controls what information we see online. One way that individuals have tried to exert influence is called Google bombing, and you know it must work because Google's out to stop it. More on that from the Listening Post's Salah Khader.
It has been called cyber graffiti, link bombing, and Google bombing, key weapons in a war of information. The unwitting foot soldiers, anyone who uses a search engine, and the battleground, by virtue of its market dominance, Google.
Google bombing can be called a new age internet propaganda of sorts, because it depends on a couple of motivated surfers or tech savvy guys getting together and deciding to point Google search results towards pages that it otherwise shouldn't.
So type in French military victories into the Google search engine, and what you won't get is a discussion about the Napoleonic Wars. The Google bombers have been on a raid, so what you do get is a page stating that there are no search results. And the question, did you mean French military defeats?
Google bombing basically makes use of a Google phenomenon called PageRank. Nobody knows exactly how Google indexes its pages and ranks them, but we do know that it gives very high priority to pages that are themselves very highly viewed or surfed by lots of people on the internet.
The most famous Google bomb occurred in 2003 with a great piece of internet satire, which the search engines were unable to control.
When a bunch of people got together and they linked the words, I think they were total failure, from their own sites to the official biography page for George Bush. And enough of them did that, such that if you went to Google and typed in total failure, the #1 search result would be George Bush's bio. So that's funny.
The miserable failure link bomb is still effective on many search engines, such as Yahoo, MSN, Ask, and Alta Vista. However, Google themselves have diffused that particular bomb. The main Google blog said that they were concerned that users would believe that the skewed results reflected Google's own editorial judgment and opinions.
As far as Google bombing is concerned, this is in fact the first time that a high-profile incident like the miserable failure case has prompted Google to publicly admit that they're going to change the algorithm specifically to target Google bombing, because at the end of the day, it is giving you a skewed result.
Having a laugh at George Bush's expense is one thing, but other Google bombers are taking it more seriously.
People Google bomb for political reasons as well. I mean, as part of political campaigns. An example being, the recent example being the Egyptian blogger who was jailed, having his friends or asking his friends to launch a Google bombing campaign to raise awareness of his situation by using the same anchor text on their own pages or on their own websites to link to his site or his blog. So that if someone searched in Google for those terms, his blog would be the first result returned.
The goal was for the Free Allah website to move to the top of the rankings, so that people, when they search the word Egypt, instead of finding information about tourism, they would find the Free Allah blog, and they would become aware of Allah's situation.
This tactic has given birth to the term demo blogger, people like Mary Joyce who played an integral part in a campaign.
The Free Allah Google bomb was created in May of 2006 because the blogger Allah Abdel Fattah was arrested during a protest in favor of an independent judiciary in Egypt, and he was arrested along with other bloggers and democracy activists. So what Google did is it deleted the Free Allah website from its internal files. So actually now when you search for the Free Allah website on Google, you will not find it because it's not in the Google rankings at all.
It's called the Great Google Dance because hundreds and thousands of webmasters all over the world need to know every time Google is tweaking their algorithm so that they can do their search engine optimization and get their websites higher ranked.
The great Google dance continues, with ever more inventive campaigners developing new ammunition to further their causes. And Google, the increasingly regulated corporate entity, is tightening up its act, to the sadness of many internet users.
And finally, the musical world has Sweden to thank for ABBA, Roxette, The Hives, and Johan Söderberg. If you've never heard of Söderberg, he's the Swede who put together this version of Endless Love, with George Bush as Lionel Richie to Tony Blair's Diana Ross. It's a worthy and rather touching Internet Video of the Week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
My love, there's only you in my life, the only thing that's right. My first love, your every breath that I take, your every step I